Have you ever started an overly ambitious project and then spent so much time thinking, planning, and preparing for it that you never actually get started? Totally normal and relatable, right? Totally not just me trying to rationalize my odd and unusual behavior in a desperate attempt to feel like less of a failure. Please help, it's been 5 years and I can't stop. Hello everyone, my name is Nathan, and welcome to the first episode of Leeria Character Designs, a series where I fail miserably at character design while continuing to procrastinate on starting Leeria. Now you might be saying to yourself, Leeria? What's Leeria? Trust me, you don't want me to answer that. I wasn't exaggerating when I said I've been working on this thing for 5 years. I've got so much characters, lore, and history that I could talk for an entire day about it without running out of things to say, and as much as I would love to do that, because I very much would, if I did, this video would be like 11 and a half hours too long, so we're not going to do that. Instead, I'm just going to give you the very basic premise for the series, just enough to understand the context for the characters and their designs. I'll probably explain more later as it becomes relevant, but for now, I'm just going to keep it simple. Plus, there are some things that I want to keep a secret from you guys. I'm not against spoiling small things, but there are some details that if given away would completely ruin the story. Long story short, Leeria's long, so I'm going to keep this short. Got it? Good. Let's get into it. Leeria is an ambitious passion project of mine, inspired by comics like Stupid Short Eevee Comic and Two Kinds, both of which I would highly recommend if, like me, you enjoy a blend of serious, smart storytelling and stupid, silly characters. And Leeria is pretty much just another webcomic in that same vein. To say that it has become bloated over the years would be an understatement. At last count, the story has around 40 named characters, with plenty more that have yet to be named. The story is so long, I've had to divide things into distinct phases like it's a frickin' MCU or something, which isn't as silly a comparison as you'd think. That's how ridiculously big this thing is. Now, of course, this makes summing down the entire comic incredibly difficult, but I'm gonna try my best to do that for you now. Let's do this. Okay, Leeria is a cartoon that follows a cast of zany anthropomorphic characters as they engage in mischief, slapstick humor, and other such antics in a weird and colorful world. Yep, that's it. That's literally all I can tell you without spoiling anything important. Now, as you can probably guess from that description, Leeria is very furry and very queer. I'll give you 3 guesses as to why. Now, you might be asking yourself, Nathan, you said you've been working on this for 5 years? Shouldn't you have character designs by now? Which, first of all, you don't need to call me out like that, okay? The whole intro was about how I spent my entire time thinking about it and not enough time actually doing anything. But second of all, I have actually made some designs. The main characters have pretty much already gone through several iterations. They were just all awful, because my character design skills are atrocious. So, this is kind of more of a do-over. Now, because of this, I'm going to be using a different method than usual to create these designs, which will hopefully improve my skills and the end result. I say that like I had a method for it beforehand. There was no method, only madness. I literally just sat down, started drawing, and then prayed to God that the end result was good. Now I have a method, or at least the concept for one, and I want to try it out to see how effective it is and how well it works for me. Because there's no such thing as a universally applicable method for character design, or any form of art, really, despite what a lot of art gurus might tell you. Their methods for doing things aren't really better than yours, they're just different. Stop pretending like they're special or magical. They're not. Sorry, I don't know what came over me. I guess I just had to get something off my chest. Foreshadowing. What? Anyways, the new tentative plan looks something like this. Part 1. Conceptualize. This is where I really get into the head of the character and figure out who they are and what role they serve in the story. This is arguably one of the most important steps of character design, and frequently overlooked. You can't design a character if you don't really know the character you're trying to design, or what their purpose is. A design for a low-level enemy in a video game is going to be a lot different from the main character in an animated show. I'm going to be mostly skipping this step for the main characters of the series because I already know who they are and what their deal is, We'll probably get more into the step later down the line when I have to design newer characters, but for now, I'll just use this as an excuse to explain a little bit of the character's personality and background to you guys. Step 2. Key elements. By key elements here, I mean recognizable elements of the design that are intended to stick in the viewer's head. Things like color scheme, weapons or other props, clothing, markings, etc. I like to do this as a separate step from the drawing process because it helps provide a basic framework from which you can add or subtract detail from a design. Again, this is a step I'll mostly be skipping past for the main characters since I've already figured out most of that stuff already. The only big element that I really have to worry about right now is clothing, for reasons that I'll explain when we get to step 6. Step 3. Silhouette. This just means drawing the shapes or outline of the character without any details or line art. This is a common bit of character design wisdom, and one that I frequently ignore because I like my sweet line art. But I want to change that this time around by starting with the silhouette and building off of it from there. This entire step can basically be summed up as large brush, solid fill, go burr. Step 4. Sketch. Adding line art and details onto the silhouette, in this case, literally by drawing on top of it. This is probably going to be the longest part of the process, knowing me, but I'm going to try and keep it focused and avoid nitpicking, because I have a bad habit of wasting a lot of time making my sketches look pretty, even though that kind of defeats the entire point of a sketch. Step 5. Color. Pretty self-explanatory, really, just adding color to the character. I won't talk too much about the color choices for these designs, because primary colors are literally the first thing I think about for each character. Plus, it's kind of part of the aesthetic for the series that every character has a new color palette, and it's somewhat important for lore reasons. This step will mostly be about the placement of those colors and picking secondary colors for things like clothing and gear if necessary. Speaking of clothing and gear, Step 6. Outfit. The only thing I suck at more than character design is outfit design, which is probably when most of my previous designs didn't have any. Now, I've gone back and forth several times on whether or not it makes sense for the characters to be wearing clothes, and what time period said clothes should be from. Including clothes seems like a no-brainer, but people of this world are covered in fur and have no visible genitalia, so not wearing clothes would probably seem pretty normal to them. And even if they did, Leeria technically takes place in a medieval-era world, but they also have a lot of modern stuff for lore reasons, so really I could go either way with their style of clothing. In the end, I decided to compromise on both fronts, giving them clothing but keeping it minimal, and giving them styles appropriate to their personalities without making them look like fantasy characters or teenagers from the 2010s. And finally, Step 7. Refine. This step is just for making some clean renders, both with and without clothing, for a simple reference sheet, which is kind of the whole point of doing this. Yeah, I know, it's a lot of steps, but breaking things down like this really can help, or at least it does for me. Plus it makes the process a lot more satisfying, since you get to check something off of the list at every step of the process. There's a little brain hack pro tip for you. Try breaking things down into tiny, manageable goals, and then doing them one at a time. It makes things easier and less daunting, especially in the beginning. Now with that out of the way, let's get drawing. So for this video, I thought it would make sense to start with Hunter, who is kinda sorta the main character of the comic. I say kinda sorta because the main cast are all kinda main characters, and there's nothing overly special about Hunter that justifies him being the main character of the series. I just sort of decided at some point that he should be the main character, and now he's kind of become the mascot for the entire comic. Basically, all of the characters' personalities are based on specific archetypes, partially because that makes it easier to tell them apart and remember them, but also because it helps when designing them. Hunter's archetype is that of the cool older brother, the kind that acts childish and playful around their younger siblings and or friends, the one that is constantly getting into trouble with authority figures because of their rash behavior. That's Hunter. Obviously, there's more to Hunter's character than that, but these are the important elements I wanted to convey with his design. Everything else would serve to contrast with his outward appearance. Now, I was already pretty sure what visual elements I wanted to include in Hunter's design before I started this project, but I decided to write them out anyway, mostly for your guys' benefit, but also to see if there was anything I wanted to add or change. The color and floppy ears have been around almost from the beginning, and are there to give Hunter the feeling of a playful dog, something that greatly reflects his personality and aligns well with the anthro design elements of the Leerians. The crescent moon is important for lore reasons that I can't get into, but symbols like these are a fairly consistent design element, and are intended to reflect something about the character. Think of them like a hybrid between a cutie mark and a superhero logo. The only new addition is the jacket, which is just like the first article of clothing I thought to give him. I always sort of imagined Hunter wearing a jacket. It just sort of fits with his big brother vibes. When jumping into Hunter's silhouette, I decided to start with stature that I would describe as the stereotypical male main character in an underdog story. Describing exactly what I mean here is difficult, but chances are you already know what I'm talking about. The skinny, but not pathetic, teenager with generic proportions whose presence radiates hidden potential. Shape Language 101 is that circular shapes are inviting and kind, while triangular ones are dangerous and energetic. So I used a base of round shapes covered in sharp edges in order to sell that chaotic but playful energy that is Hunter's trademark. Finally, I touched up his pose a bit and added in the signature design elements for Leerians, which is what I call this race of anthro creatures. Things like the pill-shaped lower arms, simple digitigrade legs, and of course, ears and a tail, the latter of which I, as usual, forgot about until later in the process. I always seem to forget about tails for some reason, despite the fact that I almost exclusively draw furries. What is up with that? Anyways. Going into the sketch, I started by going over the body and limbs very roughly, trying to avoid adding more detail than was absolutely necessary. During this step, I also added in some fluffs of fur in a couple of places to get the furry look that I wanted, and also to help sell the chaotic energies of Hunter's personality. Pro tip, if you want a furry character to look more chaotic, try drawing their tufts of fur curving in different directions. It's such a simple and silly detail, but I think in this case it works. I also added in some other details that weren't visible in the silhouette, namely the paws and crescent moon symbol in the chest, both of which were absolute trash. If you're thinking, wow, that looks way worse than what you typically draw, then you're not alone. I was thinking the same thing as well. My comfort zone has always been in a somewhat realistic style, not realistic per se, but pretty close to it. This type of cartoony, hyper-simplified rendering is not my forte, and I really had to fight my instincts while working on it. As I sort of mentioned earlier, most of the main cast's color schemes have already been decided, and Hunter is no different. His scheme has always been primarily black and dark gray with golden yellow accents. I briefly considered the idea of using only those three colors, an idea I've toyed with in the past, as you can probably tell from some of my older designs that I was using as reference, but I ultimately decided against it. I think having a bit of white in his design helps give it more contrast. This is also coincidentally the same reason why I changed his hands and feet to be gray instead of black later on, to make them stand out more and draw the viewer's attention. This is actually very important, because motion and body language are central to the readability of comic characters, especially in a comic strip style one, which is the vibe I'm kind of going for with Leeria. You need to be able to look at a character and know in an instant what they're doing with their hands, feet, head, etc. Faces tend to naturally draw attention, since our brains are wired to do that, but hands and feet can easily be missed if you're not careful. Or, you're terrible at drawing hands and feet, and so you just purposefully hide them, something I am definitely guilty of doing. Now, I was originally planning to show you my process of drawing Hunter's outfit, but unfortunately, when I sat down to do that, I forgot to hit record. So instead, I'm just going to explain what I did. Thankfully, there's not much to say about the step, since I was basically just adding the collar and jacket and calling it a day. The color is plain black, and is designed to look like the crescent is hanging from it. A bit of an Easter egg to those of you watching this video, since the viewer isn't supposed to be aware that it's a part of their body when the series begins. It's sort of purposeful subterfuge. The jacket is also black, but with a golden yellow interior, because I found a cool reference image that had a similar type of design, and I really liked how it looked. Plus, it fits with Hunter's color scheme. Now, it was at this point in the process that I ended up departing from my initial plan. See, an important part of character design is iteration, asking others what they think about the character and their design, and using that information in order to improve it. But for some reason I had totally blanked and hadn't included anything of the sort in my original plan. Because I'm an idiot. I intend to rectify that mistake now, though, by making parts 7 and 8 feedback and redesign respectively, so I'll be hopping right into those right about now. For this step, I decided to get feedback from 2 different sources. The first was from a small furry Discord server I was a part of, but sadly that proved rather unhelpful. I only got a response from one person, and their advice didn't provide me with any problems to fix or ways to improve the design, so I quickly moved on to my second source of feedback, a friend of mine named Tyler. who has been helping me with Leeria on and off for the last couple of years, so naturally he was able to provide much more comprehensive and specific advice, even if I spent most of the time lore dumping on him. After talking for a while, I got a good sense of what was and wasn't working with the design and what changes I could make to improve it. Also, short plug, Tyler isn't an artist, but he is a very skilled voice actor with his own YouTube channel, so if you're interested in that type of thing, consider checking him out with the link in the description. All the advice I received seemed to suggest that the big things, like body shape, stature, and expression, all aligned with my intentions for the characters, so for the redesign I focused mostly on smaller details. The first change was to flip the crescent moon on the clothed reference, so that it was no longer a mirror image of the unclothed one. This is like a really minor detail, but important, since both sides of the ref were supposed to be like the same character seen from different angles, not a mirrored version of them or something. Then I decided to remove the hood from the jacket and just make it into like a windbreaker or one of those weird hoodless jackets, because, like, what is it with designers making jackets without hoods? I don't understand. If you're going to wear an additional layer to stay warm and dry, wouldn't you want something to cover your head? I mean, it's not like you having a hood on means you have to use it. The main feature of a hood is that you put it on and take it off whenever you want. Anyways, I'm getting distracted. The hood part was just too confusing and created a lot of visual clutter, so removing it felt like the right thing to do. I also messed with the pockets on the jacket a bit to make them look more like pockets, and to again reduce the clutter of the design. That was basically it. Everything else was just cleanup, and because I couldn't help myself, a little bit of polish as well. Old habits die hard, unfortunately, and at this point I felt like I had earned it. After that, all that was left was to reduce the opacity and get started on the final render. For the effectiveness of the new method, I would definitely say that my 9-step process is incredibly useful. It's not perfect, not by a long shot, but it's certainly better than what I had before, though just about anything is better than nothing. Sometimes even a bad plan is better than not having a plan at all. I'll definitely be keeping the feedback and design steps in the future, though I'll probably limit the feedback for later designs to mostly friends and people I know so things are more constructive. Not to say that getting feedback from strangers is bad, just that I don't have the time or energy to waste on that right now. But I've been putting it off for long enough. You want to hear about the design itself, and I'm gonna be honest, Hunter's design turned out way better than I thought it would. The result is clean, effective, and doesn't make me want to gouge my eyes out when I look at it, all of which are very important. It's easily the best design I've made for Hunter yet, and something I'm actually really proud of despite how simple and cartoony it is, which is another bad habit of mine, as well as a big pet peeve. Despite what some people might claim, just because a piece of art is simple or cartoony does not mean it is lazy or requires no skill to make. The only reason inexperienced artists like me tend to gravitate towards simpler art is because it has a lower barrier to entry than other kinds of art. But just because it's easy doesn't make the end result any good. Quality is not determined by the amount of detail or work you put into something, it's determined by how effectively it achieves the desired result. I set out to create a simple, easily replicatable, recognizable, expressive character whose personality is apparent from their visual design alone, and I think I succeeded in that goal. Sometimes it just really frustrates me that both artists and non-artists alike so often act like cartoons or comics are inferior forms of art because they're not as realistic or as detailed as other forms of media. A well-rendered simple character is always going to be more impressive than a confusing mess of a complex character, no matter how real or detailed the latter one is. This is actually a common trap that inexperienced artists can fall into, thinking that just adding more detail will make their art better. It won't. If you can't draw a stick figure in a way that is pleasing to the eye, then you're not going to be able to do so with an anatomically correct human figure, no matter how hard you try. I myself have made this mistake in the past, and still continue to make it even in the present. It's not a mistake to realize that what you are attempting is beyond your abilities. It just means that you either have to scale it back or save it for later. I've drawn the same collection of characters 4 times before, and until now, none of them has even come close to being what I wanted them to be. Each time, I was forced to confront the reality that either my skills were not good enough, or this project was too ambitious. And every single time, I refused to compromise on the project. Next time, I told myself, next time you'll get it right. You have no idea how cathartic it is to finally get there after all this time. 5 years it's been since I started work on Leeria. 5 years of waiting, and planning, and preparing, and the journey has only just begun. But as easy as it would be for me to be disappointed in my past self for being so foolish, or thinking myself an idiot for refusing to scale down the project, or even to think I was pathetic because I couldn't even draw a simple character that was actually good, and believe me, I thought all of these things. Now that I'm here, though, I choose to see it from a different perspective. Past Nathan never gave up on Leeria. I never gave up on Leeria. Not after failing to design the main characters 4 times in a row, not after rewriting the plot for the 11th time, not even after changing fundamental elements of the lore and world for the umpteenth time. I spent my free time thinking, planning, and preparing because that was all I could do. The instant that I came up with the idea for Leeria, I knew that it was different, that it was special, important, and it has taken me the last 5 years to figure out why. So let me try to explain this project one last time. Leeria is about comedy and tragedy in equal measure, of finding one's identity and purpose and being the best you can be, of triumphing over adversity and growing as a person, of standing in the face of overwhelming odds and the existential nature of our own existence. I'll let you decide whether that's the story or the journey to make it, but in my mind, it will always be both. Wow, that got kind of serious for a second. Quick, think of something silly! No, you can't make a massive webcomic with no experience or skills. Ha ha, funny furry comic go brrrr! There, that's better. Nothing like a bit of levity to clear the air, am I right? Anyway, if you've made it this far into the video, I want to thank you for watching and tolerating my annoying voice. If somehow you enjoyed the video, you can give it a like, and if for some reason you want to see more stuff like this in the future, consider subscribing and hitting the bell icon. My current schedule involves posting every month, so you can expect a constant supply of high-quality content in the future. Let's be honest, my videos are garbage and nobody cares. Look, I'm gonna do my best, okay? I'll get there. Eventually. Anyways, thanks again for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye!